All right, we're going to talk about rationalizing the denominator. So the big idea here is when you have this fraction, 5 divided by the square root of 3, we cannot have a square root in the denominator. We do not want to report our fractions with a square root in the denominator. Some tools that you're going to need before we do this is if you have not watched my simplifying square roots or simplifying radicals videos, you should probably watch those first because a few of those ideas are touched here. So if I want to get rid of the square root in the denominator, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by the same thing. So if I have the square root of 3 down there, we're going to multiply the bottom by the square root of 3. But in order to do that, I also have to multiply the top by the square root of 3. So when I do that on bottom, notice how both these numbers are inside the square root. The 3 is inside the square root, the 3 is inside the square root. We can multiply those together. So 3 times 3 is 9. So I have a 9 inside of the square root. Where if we go to the top in the numerator, I have a 5 on the outside and a 3 on the inside. We can't mix and match there. The numbers that are on the outside stay on the outside. Numbers on the inside of the square root stay on the inside. So we're left with a 5 square root of 3. Now once I multiply it all together, I want to see what I can do to simplify there. I want to see what pieces can simplify. So let's start with the bottom. Square root of 9, that is a perfect square, you get 3. Up top, 5 square root of 3, you would look to try and break down that square root of 3. Can't do a whole lot with it, so it's going to stay as 5 square root of 3. Now before I move on, I want to say I have a complete answer here. I do want to check and make sure, is there anything I could do to simplify even more? Especially look for those numbers on the outside, like 5 over 3, if we could reduce that fraction. We can on that one, but like, say we had a 4 over 6, that can be reduced to like 2/3. So you want to be careful for any reducing on the outside. So I'll do one more example here, a little bit more complicated, but it's covering the same ideas. I have the square root of 3 divided by the square root of 6. At first glance, there's no simplifying of the square roots top or bottom that I can do, but I really can't have a square root of 6 on the bottom. So what we're going to do is multiply the bottom by the square root of 6. But again, if I multiply the bottom by the square root of 6, I have to multiply the top. So on bottom, both pieces there are in a square root. So square root of 6, square root of 6. So the inside, 6 times 6 is 36. On top, both the square root 3 and the square root 6, both numbers there are inside the square root, so we can multiply. So again, they have to be either both on the outside, both on the inside. Can't mix and match. 6 times 3 is 18. Now what I would like to do is I need to look at simplifying like square root of 18 and the bottom square root of 36. I need to clean up the top and clean up the bottom. So if I have the square root of 18, if you think back to my other videos, a number that can go into 18 that we do know the square root of is 9, where 9 times 2 gets us 18. So we can break this down to a square root 9, square root 2. And now let's take it a little bit further. The square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 2 do not know, so we're going to leave it as square root of 2. So up top, we're going to have 3 square root 2. Now if I look at the bottom, I have a square root of 36, which we already know square root of 36 is just plain old 6. So I get a 6 on bottom. Now before I say this is my final answer, I do want to check for any simplifying. If you look here, ignore the square root 2. But look at 3 and 6. I have a 3 over 6, which you kind of have to think back to your old fraction days. That can be reduced if I divide both the top and bottom by 3. You get 1/2. So our answer here is we're going to change that 3 over 6 to 1 over 2 with a square root of 2. So 1 square root of 2 over 2 would be our answer. And that was rationalizing the denominator.